Nobody starts at the finish line. You have to start somewhere. In order for you to get to where you're going, to meet that destination, you can't think that you're going to get there instantly. Welcome to another episode of the Mr. Mindful Minute podcast, where we touch on different things, on different areas of life, on how we could go from a nothing place to a something place. And today we are touching on self-actualization, really understanding who we are at our core, grabbing our purpose. And I have my dear brother with me, Austin. He was a pro swimmer, athlete, D1 swimmer. Listen, Austin, thank you for being here with us today. I am honored. I'm definitely honored. I appreciate the opportunity of you taking the time out to talk about this conversation. So we're just going to jump right on in there. One, tell people who you are.
It's a great question. Before I dive into that, Victor, brother, thank you so much for having me on. I know I just said this a little bit right before we hopped on here, but I can't express enough how thankful I am to be surrounded by people. I know you speak to this in your previous podcasts. Surrounding yourself with good people that throw out encouragement and positive vibes. And you 100%, what you're doing here in creating this community is a beautiful thing. It's awesome. You're lifting people up. I love diving into your content over the last few days because it is filled with so much motivation, so much inspiration, so much high quality content. And I appreciate what you're doing because, it's that domino effect. We start off small and we get bigger and bigger and we, affect people in a large way. And that's exactly what you're doing here. So thank you for letting me be a part of your journey, good sir.
Thank you.
My name's Austin, simply put. I'm always conflicted with how I should introduce myself because those two words or whatever follows those two words, I am, whatever it is how we just see ourselves. And I like to say, I'm simply Austin. I'm full with experiences in life. I guess you could say in a previous younger version of me, I saw myself as a Division I swimmer. Now, before that, I saw myself as a very experienced lifeguard. Before that, I was, a son and a provider of community service to the people around me. And now I just see myself as I am of service to people. Simply put, I am always growing, always learning, and always diving into the other people's worlds and seeing how I can be of service for them. That's a little bit about me.
All right.
Very
Sounds
generic,
good.
of course.
I know from, looking at the things that you talk about on your page and what you have posted, you are somebody that is self-aware. And so just touching on that topic, what do you think was a pivotal point in your life to help you get to this place that you are right now?
Ooh. So along with being a swimmer in college, I majored in psychology. I had a minor in health and wellness and kinesiology. And what I really learned, one of the many things I should say that I learned in psychology was that we are a byproduct of both of nature and nurture, of our environment and like some biological, our DNA essentially. And to answer that question is very difficult because there was a buildup, kind of like you have a tidal wave, right? How a tidal wave comes crashing on the beach, but it didn't just appear out of nowhere and it crashed on the beach. It started way out in the ocean, and just things that rippled on, and they just happened to be very similar. So starting out when I was a little kid, I love my family. My old man, he'd take us out. I think it was like every other week. As a kid, I was super opposed to it. We'd go out to something called Fishes and Loaves out in Sacramento, and we would just donate our clothes. We had the rule, anytime we got new clothes, we had to take that many articles of clothing and put in the donate pile. So we do exactly that. We'd take our clothes with our church group and go donate them. We'd make lunches and go give it out to people. And we would just sit there and communicate and talk and have conversations with those that were less fortunate. That's definitely one of the many things. Another one was being very hands-on and creative. My mother really taught me to, ask more empowering questions, and be able to work with my hands and create, and don't be afraid to stand up for what we believe in, and ask those questions. I think throughout time, my dad, I mean, he swam in college. He got a full ride scholarship to Florida State University. Phenomenal athlete, phenomenal human being, and you learn so much in sports. And I can't even tell you the amount of lessons that I've learned and the amount of stories I could pull away from that experience. So there, I mean, there's many stories there. And I was also in high school during my first job. I was a lifeguard, and unfortunately, we had some. It's like a unfortunately experience, because I had some failure. I guess you'd call it failures. Some people drowned, and we weren't able to bring them back to life, unfortunately. So experiences like that, where it's literally life and death, and you are the only person that can show up and be of service for that person. They are, or you are their only life support. The only way that they're going to have a fighting chance to say hi to their family again. And seeing those people not make it definitely affects you in ways that you can't verbally explain. It's just, it hits home in a way that's just so profound, and teaches you those deeper meanings in life. What is really meaningful to us as human beings? What do I really care about? How do I want to show up in my life? What do I want life to mean for me? How do I want life to mean for the people around me? So stuff like that, I mean, that's just part of it. Another one is to just growing up and talking with people and listening to the people around me. Is I love storytelling, like not myself necessarily telling stories, but listening to stories. I love movies. Like I digest content like a fiend, just as a little FYI. And I love listening to Tom Bilu. And he speaks to one of these things along with another gentleman. I'm gonna have to look up his name, but let's see if I can pull it up real quick. I literally had to pull up my book or my list of books that I dive into, just because there's so many. Um, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. And what he speaks to is essentially the hero's journey. And every hero in life goes through a journey, and we all go through it in our own lives. And any movie that you watch, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's Lord of the Rings, any movie, literally anyone, Avengers, all the superhero movies, they all go through the same storyline. Essentially, you have a hero, or you have a person that meets some kind of challenge, an opportunity in life, and then they go and they meet a guide, right? And so, diving into the world of storytelling, I really realized that how do I change, or how do I positively influence people in the most effective way? And so I had to really think, how, if this is true, then how far back do I go? What is the one thing that has lasted above all else? And for me, I really looked at and dove into that world, and really realized that like narrative and storytelling, that has lasted beyond the printing press. Like ancient civilizations, how do they pass on all of their information throughout the different cultures, throughout all the ages, all the years that they survived, all the wars that they battled through? It was all through storytelling. Any religion is essentially a story. Now, how it goes about explaining that story is all different, but it provides narrative and just little stories of, hey, this is how you should live life. Like, let he who has not sinned throw the first stone. And nobody's going to pick up that rock, and nobody threw that stone, because look, we've all been that person. We've all made mistakes. And that's something that resonates with every person. That's something we all understand. There's certain universal truths that play out in everybody's life. It's too strong. It's too big to ignore. And being able to pay attention to those little bits of information here and there, and understanding that narrative has been playing a huge part in my life, and being more aware of that through my parents, through my religion, through my relationship with God, how that's developed throughout the years, through my relationship with friends, with family members, with strangers, with people I don't even know, the people I cross paths with. It's just understanding, look, you have a story. Like, I want to listen to that person's story because it's interesting. It's filled with so many different bits of information, so much wisdom. And low key, one of the things I love about your podcast when I was diving in is at the very end, you always share like that strange little that like strange stories of Victor, right? And it's like I love that because it shows what your perception of the world that you've experienced is. And that's dude, that's a dope thing. I love listening to that. It's so entertaining. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. So it sounds like for yourself, this has been something that you have been able to realize for a very long time from, how your parents, raised you, your belief system, athletes, just seems like you're very self-aware because you're always learning.
Mm-hmm.
You're always looking for an opportunity for you to learn. So I'm pretty sure you're very intuitive and you're always paying attention to things. And so, how would a person that is trying to develop that type of awareness, what would advice would you give them so they can start honing in on who they are? That way they can get to the level that they're trying to reach.
All right. I'm going to tap on this again. And if anybody's already dove into your podcast, they've heard it once and they've heard it twice. You interviewed another lady about this, and she is going to respond the same. She responded the same way I'm going to respond is write it down. Do not miss the details. Look, I got a 5-minute journal. In fact, I got it right below me here somewhere. I'm not going to pull it out right now, but it's the 5-minute journal you can find on Amazon. Every morning I fill it out, and it's, write 3 things that you're grateful for. How is today going to be great? You write those 3 things. You've spoken to this before as well, is positive affirmations saying, what about me is so great, and how am I going to step into that greatness today? Look, journaling people think is, some less than manly thing. And I would beg to differ simply because our life is an experiment, if you will. And we want to deliver the results of our life experiment to our kids, to future generations. The only way to do that is to take notes. In every experiment, social and or otherwise, scientists, they jot down, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what were the extraneous variables, what could have affected the possible outcomes of whatever it is I was doing. They take notes. So why would we not do the same thing? Look, when you're sick, anytime somebody gets sick and they don't feel good, I always tell people, write what you're doing different down, or whatever led up to you feeling sick. Just write down like that previous hour, what you did that would lead up to those events. If it's anything different than what you usually do, then, hey, you can use your process of deduction to say, hey, maybe, it was, I took a cold shower in the middle of the day in Mexico, and I drank some of the water, and I don't usually do that. Okay, well, you might have Montezuma's revenge. You might be sick from that water because there's bacteria in it. That's something you don't do. So now we could use that process of deduction to say, all right, what could be going wrong? How can I fix? We're not broken. How can we repair ourselves? How can we become better, grow, learn? And that all starts with keeping track of things. And as smart as we are, and as intelligent and as great as our hippocampuses are, our memories are, like, we're not perfect. And it's hard to keep track of every little thing. So write it down, because when we do, we keep track of the details, and we never know what you're going to miss. There's so much power in that. Write it every morning. Do a little review of, hey, how am I going to make today great? And then in the evening time, what happened today that made me great? And if there was something that didn't go great, okay, well, why didn't it go great? And how could I make sure that that doesn't happen again? How could I grow? How can I learn from that? Just process of self-evaluation. And you've spoken to this too before, is you got to be real with yourself, right? It ain't always easy. Usually never is. It's very difficult to look at yourself and be really real. I know there's another book as well, Complete Ownership. I forget, Jocko Willink actually writes it. And one of the things he speaks to is, look, if we take complete ownership for anything that goes awry or wrong in our life, in psychology, we call that an internal locus of control, meaning that we take responsibility and say, hey, it's not my friends, it's not their fault, it's not my wife's fault, it's not my husband's fault, it's not the teacher's fault, whomever, it's not my boss's fault, it is my fault. And now that I know that, how can I grow? How can I improve? what can I change? And we gotta write down. We gotta, have that process, that list of events of what it is that we're doing, what we want to move towards.
I think that's really important that you're saying that, because a lot of times, even with our devices, we get so caught up with everything that we're doing. And so you said pay attention to the details so you can write it down. So we don't want to be overlooking the things that is happening to us in our lives, where it's like, oh, well, this is mundane. I'm just doing this just to do it, because that's not going to help us to tap in to find out who we really are. And so by writing things down, this is what you're saying is going to help you to find out who you really are. Why do I respond the way I respond? What type of stuff do I really like? And so I like how you're saying, write that stuff down. That is really important. And so let me ask you this question. When it comes to a person is saying, I'm fully aware of who I am, but I don't know how to be that person when I'm around other people. How do you do that?
That's a great question. I think that's one of the beautiful things in life is being able to discover who you are by yourself and then be able to bring that into the presence of others. It's a challenge. It absolutely is a challenge, because how many of us experience self-doubt? How many of us question ourselves in the presence of others, right? And stepping into that role of the greatest version of ourselves is no easy task. And we're all susceptible to, being judged. We all fear that to some degree, because our innate nature is to fit in, to get along with people, to not stick out. And there's something that you said that really resonated with me when I was listening to your podcast yesterday. And it was something along the lines of, if not you, then who? If we ask ourselves that in any given moment and say, if everyone's going to fit in, then we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to create diversity. We're not going to have change to any significant degree. We're not going to be able to better our community, our society, the people that we experience, that we interact with on a daily basis. So what am I going to do to help be a part of that positive change, if that's what I want to do? And if not you, then who? Right? You got to stand up for what you believe in and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be afraid, because, and this was one I was personally challenged with. I had to ask myself and this was my experience with self-doubt was, who am I? Who am I to say this? Who am I to question other people? Who am I to be myself around other people? What if they betray me? What if they make fun of me? What if they laugh at me? What if they give me a hard time? What if they don't like me? Those were all thoughts that ran through my head on a constant basis. I even found myself while I was on a swim team, I was even the captain of the swim team, I would sometimes put on a face because I didn't entirely feel like I could be my full self. And that was a challenge. So one, and I can go off on that and give me a second before I do, because, who am I? I had to realize, especially very recently in the last 4 years, that who am I not to be that person? Who told me I couldn't be the best version of myself, and who's stopping me? I am responsible for my own happiness. Nobody else is going to look out for me more so than me. God's up there. God loves me. He's got all the love for me in the world. But I got to be real. God doesn't have a physical form. He's not standing right next to me. He's not giving me a hug right now. Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, he is absolutely. But if I want to go out and celebrate my love for whatever it is I'm most passionate about with the people around me, I got to ask myself, who am I not to be that person? And then it's just a matter of finding the right group. Look, let's face it. If people can sell these random tchotchkes on Amazon, right? Those little, what they call little fidget spinners where they put them in their hand and the kids just play with them. Like, if people can sell that and find an audience for that, there are plenty of people that resonate with you, that are thinking the same thoughts as you. How often, I know this is true for guys, maybe this has happened to you or not. Maybe you saw, your wife or your husband in the club, or in a certain place before they were your wife or husband, and in a store or something, you're like, wow, I can't talk to them. Like, that person's beautiful. Like, they're way out of my league. Like, that's that's happened to me several times, right? Just like that person, like, even when it comes to like looking up to inspirational figures like coaches or other guys that were my similar age that were doing great things, I want to go talk to them because I'm going to figure out what's going on through their mind that makes them so great, makes them chase their passion, what makes them so talented. Again, diving into that narrative. And it's realizing, look, nobody's going to be responsible. Nobody's going to do it for me. I got to go out and find that audience, be a part of that community, and just ask that question. Be infinitely curious. How much power is that in just saying, I know nothing, so let's start asking questions and understanding what's going on. And nobody's going to turn you down. Well, I don't want to say nobody, but there's going to be a very small group of people that are going to turn you down for being genuinely curious and showing up with and asking questions. I always say this, and I'm sure you've heard it before, is, seek first to understand before being understood. How powerful is that?
Yeah.
Right? When it comes to an argument that we're having with another individual, well, maybe we just got to step back from whatever's going on and say, hey, maybe I'm just trying to force them to see my perspective. But what if I step into their shoes and try to understand, what if I just, instead of doing this, I do this a little bit more and just listen and be compassionate, understand what's going on in their world, and show up for that person. Now, that's a little bit of a
Let me
tangent.
stop you for a second
Yeah.
and touch on something that because you hit a couple of points. You talked about, having that inadequacy feeling against other people. You talked about us really just denying who we are by saying, well, who am I to do this? And so what you're saying is how we overcome that is actually saying, well, if not me, why not me? Why can't I do that? Yes. And so if I'm saying this correctly, how a person actually starts tapping into their full self is start really asking themselves, if not me, why not me? And so I think that that's a really good point that you're making, because as you said, we all at some point in some area, we deal with self-doubt in some type of way, right? And so when we're trying to be fully committed to who we are and fully transparent, we have to be willing to ask ourselves, if not me, why not me? I like how you said that. All right, so now I'm gonna let you get back to your point that you were making, because I know that you was getting to a point.
Yeah. Well, I know that was going on a little bit of a tangent. I just want to reel it in because it's always important to not, chase the rabbit too far down the hole. But right, your question was, how do we show up and be the best version of ourselves around other people? And that's by realizing that exactly what you spoke to, right? If not me, why not me? Why can't I be that person? Why shouldn't I be that person? And life is all about understanding that it's about just stepping into that role, trusting blindly in your faith, whether that's God or whoever that is, and whatever that means to you, and saying, I'm going to do what is most passionate, what resonates most with me. And there's going to be an audience. There's going to be people out there that are going to be attracted towards you. Like, there's great photographers out there. I've met photographers in Hawaii. One of my buddies, he's a phenomenal underwater photographer. And yeah, if you show his pictures to, people that are, in Fortune 500 companies, they may not be as interested as people that live in Hawaii, people that love to adventure. It's about finding your niche, finding your people, your tribe. Your tribe is your vibe, and your vibe is your tribe. So you got to go find those people and connect with them. Right? Just like, hey, how do I be my greatest version of myself? Right? Is by people like you, connecting with similarly like-minded people. And anybody listening to this, look, you are one of those people. You could easily be having the same conversation that we're having right now with the people around you, asking those empowering questions, stepping into that role of why not me? simply put.
I like that. So all right. Now that we have covered those things, let me ask you, what is something that you teach people as a coach or perspective that you actually give them when it comes to fully claiming your purpose? Because we know knowing who you are
Mm.
is also connected to fully claiming your purpose so you can walk into it. So, what do you teach people or help people to see as a coach?
Just like in the hero's journey, right? We always everybody I don't see myself as the hero on anybody's journey. I don't have the answers for anybody. I have answers that have worked for myself. I can only speak from my own personal experience, from that which I've studied from, and that is all I have to give. And plus asking more empowering questions. I think there's so much power in that. And I say that with absolute certainty that I know everyone has the answer within themselves. It's about guiding that person to discovering that answer and having that answer be their own truth. Let's face it. You taken a test and when you're younger or even more recently, and somebody probably could have sat in there and you could have given you the answers, right? But guess what? You don't learn anything if you're just given the answers. I could sit here and tell people that's right, that's wrong, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. I could do that. Would it benefit another individual? Short term, possibly. Long term, absolutely not. It'd actually be more detrimental to those individuals if I just gave them the answers, because it would be cheating. The power in being a coach and being a guide for somebody, being a friend for somebody, is simply asking them questions, leaving those little breadcrumbs, right? It's like Hansel and Gretel, leaving those breadcrumbs in the forest for them to ultimately discover the answer that they need in their life. And one of those questions that people look for, and I always, that last little breadcrumb, and there's always steps that lead up to it, of course, is asking questions, because and I always speak to this, you got to meet somebody where they are to take them where they need to go. And so,
Ah,
yes. And so in order to do that, if I know I'm about to say this, and people listening, and some people might be at the beginning of their adventure. There might be a couple advanced course people in here that have been doing this for 5-10 years. They've dedicated their life 15, 20 years into this, and they understand it very quickly. So I'm going to say this, and with that being said, context is everything. I want people to know listening in that take this with a grain of salt. Tony Robbins speaks to this, and this is where I originally got it from. And Ed Milet speaks to this. Tom B. speaks to this. Anybody that's around Tony Robbins has spoken to this. I'm sure Tony got this from who was it? Probably Jim Rohn, right? That was Toby Robbins' mentor, one of his many mentors. The dude's like, he's got his hand in so many baskets. The dude's a legend. Anyways, how is the worst thing in your life, the single worst thing that's ever happened to you, how is that the best thing?
and
And
I think that's a good question.
I think, I don't think, excuse me, I believe strongly that rings true in all of our lives to some degree or other. So psychology teaches us that, whatever we're missing, and this is a quote I read in a book called Conversations with God, Conversations with God. It was by Neil Donald Walsh. And there's like 2 different books, phenomenal books. If you like dive into the world of philosophy and religion, it dives deep into some really interesting questions. Whether you're atheist, whatever kind of religion you are, it doesn't really matter. I highly recommend checking out, or at least getting a little synopsis of the book, because it really opens up our minds to thinking more deeply. So with that being said, the quote is, that which is can only be if it's in the presence of that which it is not. I'll say that again because it's a mouthful. That which is can only be if it is in the presence of that which it isn't. Meaning that if I live to give people, if I live to give people love, right? Or, if I say I live to give people love and be loved because that is most meaningful to me, The reason I do that is probably because when I was younger, I didn't have that love. There's a missing piece in that puzzle. So now I spend the rest of my life to some degree finding that puzzle piece that will complete that puzzle for me and bring fulfillment and meaning to my life. Um, Now, context is everything, and that appears differently in different people's lives. Great example is, I've spoken to people recently that they've been molested, they've been raped when they were younger. So then they literally look at me and say, "How can that be the best thing that ever happened to me, Austin?" I gotta say, that's a shitty thing that happened to you for sure. But think about the question and consider it as a possibility. What if, and Tom Bilu speaks to this, he's like, he plays this game called No Bullshit. What would it take? What would it take for you to step into the shoes and see that the worst thing that happened to you is actually the best thing? And the girl that I'm speaking with now, we're dating right now, and she went through a very troublesome event. And she asked me that question, like, Austin, how could it be good for me? I'm not going to dive into that story so much because that's her story. I respect that I want to respect that privacy. But I told her that's a great question. How could it be? When she started stepping into those shoes just a little bit more, she found herself showing up to a high school audience, high school classes, and now it's all on online on Zoom. Right. So she started having those conversations with people that were a lot younger than her and giving them advice on, what it is that she went through so that they wouldn't have to go through it. And just to think that just a few months before, her trajectory, what she saw for her and her future was 180 degrees different. She went from looking for short-term gratification. I heard this from a pretty smart guy, that microwave society that where we live, right? How many of us dedicate ourselves to like just that microwave instant gratification, satisfaction kind of response, doing what we need in that moment to get like that shot of what do you call it? Whatever the drug is that makes us, gives us that emotional high.
Those endorphins.
Exactly, those endorphins, right? She went from that to saying, I'm going to chase my long-term passion, turn the worst thing that ever happened to me, share it with the people that could be going through this, and I might just save a life. And I can't tell you, go for it.
Now listen, that is very true. And I never viewed it from that context that you're saying. But in those words, so I speak about this all the time. I only see my father 5 times in my life. My mom did a phenomenal job raising me, but it created a self-doubt within me as a father because I didn't see what it was like to actually be, fatherhood. But that made me show up for my daughter the best possible way that I possibly can. So I go above and beyond for her, but that situation may have created this. And so if that didn't happen, I may not have become the father that I am today. So I like how you're saying that. How could the worst situation, because we gravitate, the worst situation that ever happened to me. How could the worst situation that ever happened to me actually be used as a catalyst to be the best thing that ever happened to me? That is powerful.
It's not easy stepping into that role and seeing it from that perspective because it's literally challenging our identity. We have emotions that come up that are sparked or triggered by certain anchors in our life, and they make us mad because if we're mad, we can't be hurt. And dudes, we're masters at this. If we were hurt as a little kid, look, we can put up that wall. We can stonewall somebody so hard and be like, dude, talk to the hand, fuck off. Pardon my language there, right? But we can do that really easily. And we could draw that wall. And it's hard for us to, shit, now I got to knock down that wall. It's not easy, right? And it means challenging the reality in which we've created for ourselves in order to survive. We are fighting literally biological defense mechanisms that have been established over thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. Well, I'm not sure about hundreds of thousands, but many, many years since the dawn of mankind. We've been creating this biology within us to say, hey, this thing's going to hurt me. So I need to get angry so I can either fight it or flight from it, run from it, to avoid it in order to survive. So when we realize that we are challenging, simply put, our mind, our brain chemistry, the chemicals that were still instilled that are instilled within us as the human species, that's what we're up against. And it's not easy. It's been programmed in us for a long time. But once we start to understand, look, this is all it is that's going on. Granted, it's very complex, right? What can I do to break down these walls and say, hey, this is what happened, and this is the meaning I put into the story, right? This is the story. This is what happened. Can I separate the two? It's not easy, but if we are able to, there exists profound potential for growth and opportunity.
All right, so let me stop you for a second. So if a person says, I went through this situation, because again, we're talking about people really tapping in to be who they are 100% authentically, and walking in that no matter what environment they're in, no matter who they're around, and fully getting to that mountaintop of I'm accepting who I am, how I am, not saying that I'm not willing to be better, but this is me. And so what you're saying is making that choice, that shift, removing the emotional aspect of what the trauma did to us. And so now by us removing that emotional aspect, it gives us the opportunity to dissect it and logistically say, how can this be a positive effect in my life instead of it being a hindrance for me? So, okay, now that we know this, right? Mm-hmm. If a person says, okay, this trauma happened to me, this is the story that actually I created from it, I want to shift now. I want to go into a shift and take it from the negative and shift it to the positive. What are a few tips that a person could actually take to start shifting that? Because our minds, we are creatures of habit. And I always say we fall back on what we know, not what we don't know. And so if all I knew was this situation or this story created negative, now I'm trying to make it a positive. How do I do that?
That's a great question. And that's where a lot of people are challenged with. I want to preface that answer before I dive in with a psychology study. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of it too much, but just the general ramifications, if you will. And what it is, they started to study drug users, people that had an addiction and were dependent on drugs. And I believe they tested this in rats and like just lab rats, right? What they found was typically people, right, just like you said, people are creatures of habit. People like to do drugs in a certain environment. What they found was when a person does a drug in that environment time and time again, they develop a tolerance. One, while they're taking the drug, but two, just by being in the environment, they have chemicals that are released by their brain to say, hey, because you entered the environment and because you usually do drugs, guess what? I'm going to produce those chemicals that help create that intolerance, that create that wall to prevent big effects. I'm going to create that right now. So then all of a sudden you have this craving to do this drug, right? Because you have these chemicals that are saying, we're ready for the drugs, like come get us, right? So we can put you guys away. We know this because there's another study, right? And this was Pavlov's dogs. The same thing, pretty much. Instead of drugs, it was with a bell. When they ring the bell, the dog starts salivating. Now, it's not hungry before that. It could be out playing with its friends. It could be participating in sexual behaviors, whatever it is. But as soon as that bell rings, it's been trained to react and create saliva. That process makes it hungry. It wasn't hungry before. Now, this is really interesting because it shows up in humans, in health and wellness, and like when we go to eat food and stuff. That's a whole nother topic I could dive into, but we won't, just because that is very complex in itself. But this idea of once we get into a certain environment, we then are triggered to release endorphins and protect ourselves, right? And real quick, the question was going back to how do we create that change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge here is, look, we've been programmed when we're in our same environment, we're going to do the same old thing. It's hard to break the habit. It's hard to quit cold turkey, right?
Yeah.
People aren't good at that. So what psychologists sometimes tell people to do is change your environment. And just to finish off that quick study thing, is really interesting. So people would take, say, I don't even know how to measure. I know morphine, but people don't typically take morphine as a street drug. But let's just say, for theoretical purposes, for the purpose of this argument, that there's a user that goes in their garage every single day and takes 10 cc's of morphine, right? And they do that for a year straight, and they're used to it, and they build up this tolerance, so they actually have to go and take more and more drugs. They eventually get to the point where they're taking 50 cc's on a daily basis to get the same high. Interesting thing, when they go from the garage to any other environment, literally any other environment, they take the same amount of drugs that they normally take. And behavioralistically, we're creatures of habit, so yeah, we're going to take 50 cc's of morphine because that's what I'm used to. What happens is they overdose because the environment hasn't elicited the defense mechanisms to inhibit all of the chemicals coming in. So they found this out with people that go to parties. They would do drugs like crack, or not crack cocaine, maybe crack cocaine, but like cocaine, right? They would do the same amount, but they would overdose. That's why. So if we are in the same environment, right, and we go to a different environment, it could be potentially dangerous. But if we teach ourselves to leave whatever habit it is that we have at home, or whatever it is that we do it there, go into a new environment and have somebody to help elicit that, not elicit, to interject. And Tony Robbins speaks to this all the time. We call it a pattern interrupt. So we have a set list of patterns or behaviors that we go through anytime we have a reaction to something. So, something traumatic happened when we were younger. Say, we burnt our hand on a pan, right? No, that one can't be more. That can't really be transitive. So say, great. Here's probably a better one. We're always smoking at home, right? In the backyard, say, right? And you want to stop the behavior, but you don't necessarily know how. There's little tips and tricks. Like you could totally dip the butt of your cigarette in like balsamic vinegar. And like when you go to smoke it, you're like, oh, what is this? I don't like it, and not finish it. When you're by yourself though, you're more tempted and there's nothing stopping you. And you have the environment around you that could just say, well, just go buy a new pack. Versus if you go to a whole nother environment, Tony Robbins speaks on this, and I think it's on Spotify or Audible, and it's called UPW, Unleash the Power Within. He has a huge 4-day seminar on it, but this one breaks it down into 8 hours or something more digestible of key core concepts. But one of the stories that he tells, and again, go check him out when he goes to tell this because he's a phenomenal storyteller. What he says is this guy came to his hotel room up in Canada to stop smoking. Or the guy's in the hotel room. Tony goes to meet him, and the guy hasn't really come out at all. Needless to say, Tony goes to find, or the guy, they go to find each other, and the guy's he's outside or something, and he's Tony's like, hey, are you Jim? The guy's like, yeah, I'm Jim. He's like, I think we were supposed to meet. The guy's like, oh yeah, I'm just finishing my last cigarette. But the guy came to Tony to stop smoking. He's like, all right, well, we gotta put an end to this. So what does he do? He creates a pattern interrupt. So he starts a conversation with him. He brings him to a smoke shop that's located in the hotel. Back in the day, that was the thing. Apparently, I'm too young to fully know. But he goes in there, and he's like, all right, what do you love to smoke? The guy's like, sacred argument, let's just say red camels. I think that's like, or Marlboros. It's like Marlboros. I know that's for sure one. Right? And he literally buys like 5 cartons of Marlboros, like enough to last the dude months. And Tony looks at the guy and is like, all right, pay the man. The guy's like, I don't want all these. He's like, pay the man. Pays the guy. They go up to the hotel room. Apparently, this is back when smoking was okay in hotel rooms. And Tony puts him in that state, right? That state of, hey, so what was that experience when you first started smoking? And the guy started going back into like the very, very beginning. He told him, right? And he's like, oh, what does it feel like? What did it feel like then? How did it, he's bring up all these good, positive emotions. So the guy's sitting there and he wants a cigarette because he's like, oh, I'm talking about, I'm in the state. I want one right now. Right? All my friends that reminded me of it, of the being in the environment, remembering that environment, it brought me to that space. I want one. And Tony looks at him, all right, hey, you want one? The guy looks at him like, but I'm here to stop smoking. He's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. Just have one. The guy is like, oh, okay. So he takes one and starts smoking. And the guy keeps telling the story. And Tony looks at him. He starts yelling at him, like, uncontrolled rage, and gets the guy to freak out. And the dude's like, I don't want to smoke. I don't want to smoke right now. And Tony's like, here, take 4 more. And the guy's like, no, I don't want to smoke 4. Why are you trying to make me smoke 4? And Tony's like, smoke 4 now. If you don't, I'll beat you up or something. He doesn't say that, but he gets really mad at him. He like is on the verge of saying, hey, like, do this now. And if you know or have ever heard of or seen pictures of Tony, the dude's over 6 feet tall. He's, the biggest, softest giant ever. And if he's yelling at you, you feel kind of intimidated. The guy he takes the 4 cigarettes, starts puffing all of them away. And then, he does this a few more times. The guy ends up having like 7 cigarettes in his mouth at one point, ends up putting them all away. The pinnacle of what happens was the guy had enough. What he told Tony eventually was, you can't make me. You can't make me smoke another one. I'm not going to. You could beat me up. You could do whatever it is. You could throw me off this balcony. I don't care. I'm not going to smoke another cigarette. I hate this. It was a pattern interrupt that Tony did. He interjected in a way that caused so much pain and anguish that it caused him to say, I've had enough. So when we have a coach or a guide or a friend or somebody that we give permission to, this is huge, we have to give them permission to be that person, to hold us accountable so that they can call you out. Because once you give them permission to do so, then you can't get mad at them and they won't feel bad. Because that is key. When we show up to be a friend and we're like, hey man, maybe you shouldn't do this, and you get mad at them, that person's going to feel bad. But give them permission to do so if that's what you really want. But pattern, go for it. Yeah.
Let me say this. What you just said in the whole story is mind disruption, mind manipulation. And in order for us to transition, we have to forcefully actually change the context in our minds from what that situation or that environment created. So if every time I thought about this trauma, the environment or where it was at, it created certain things within me. And so now by me actually stopping that and creating a different environment, making a different feeling, we're actually manipulating our minds we're creating a disruptive pattern in our thinking forcefully by choice. So what you're saying is, what it's almost like a tattoo. This situation happened, it's tattooed on our minds. And in
Mhm.
order for us to put a new tattoo there, we actually have to remove the old tattoo and just put a new tattoo onto it. So now every time we see this tattoo, I don't see the previous one that was there. I
Yep.
see the new one that I created there. And so really tapping into that aspect of having that awareness of self, really walking into who we are to the fullest extent possible, so we can get to the space we're trying to get to. We have to take that step, is what you're saying. Because, like you gave the illustration of a person that's doing drugs, they started thinking about the environment. For just being in the environment alone prepped their body for it. It made them ready. It made them want to do it. And so you're saying, if we start prepping our minds to be conditioned differently, it's almost like this trauma didn't happen. Every time I think about this, I automatically start getting mad. I know that it's building up. I could see kind of where it's going, and I start building up. It's almost like anticipation. And so now we want to actually get to a place where when we think about this, it doesn't create the same anticipation. It creates a different anticipation. So instead of the anticipation being rage or frustration or anger or scared, we make the context be excitement. Oh man, this got me to a different place. This actually helped me to become who I am now. I like what you're talking about, my friend. I like what you're talking about.
Yeah. And now it's just a great example is, um, was it Luke Skywalker? He's sitting in the swamp with Yoda, and I always like to use movie references because I'm a little bit of a geek. But right, I define myself as a little bit of a geek. So um, he's sitting in the swamp, and Yoda's talking to him, and Yoda's trying to tell him, all right, Luke Skywalker comes in, flies in, his X-wing fighter lands in the swamp, and it's like slowly sinking. And Yoda tells him, "All right, get it out. Use the Force and get it out." And Luke is just like, "I'm trying. I'm doing everything you're telling me to do, but it's not working." All right, he's saying, "I'm trying," and Yoda looks at him as try or do or do not. There is no try.
Hmm.
And Yoda goes in, he uses the Force with his three little, I don't even know, fingers or whatever they are,
Yeah.
right? And he lifts it up, and Luke Skywalker's world is like, "What? You were able to do that?" See, it's kind of like us walking in a thing of snow. Time and time again, we take those same tracks. And each time, right, we're walking on the snow. The next time we come, we go a little bit deeper. We press those tracks down every time we go through that, and we go deeper and deeper. And those grooves are so much deeper, deeply ingrained within us, kind of like the grooves on a record player. The thing is, the tattoo's never gone. It never will be gone. So the goal, like you said, is to put a new tattoo over it, create new tracks, shovel in more snow on top of that, create a new set of patterns and behaviors that are stronger than the one that existed before.
Wow. Listen, that was phenomenal. Again, Austin, thank you for sharing your insight, helping really to get people to see how they can actually take these different steps to walk into who they are, to overcome any inadequacies that they may be feeling, to get over some type of trauma that has affected them negatively, and how to use that energy and now make it be a positive force in their life. And you're not by any means negating somebody's trauma or trial or anything like that. You're saying, instead of that being fuel for something negative in you, why not make it be fuel for something positive in you? Listen, you're a phenomenal speaker. You're a phenomenal coach, man. I am so humbled, and my gratitude is definitely there for you joining me for this. Um, we're definitely going to be doing some other things in the near future. Uh, Let me ask you this last question: how can people find you? Is it any products or services that you are offering that people can look you up and maybe reach out to you as a coach?
The best way to find me is on social media. That's going to be either on Facebook or Instagram. My Instagram handle is just Austin period Akre, Akre spelled Akre. And you can find me on austinakre.com. Once you click that in, it'll redirect you to my company webpage. They're both one and the same, so you feel free to reach out to me there. And I'm looking for anybody that's looking for coaching, especially being that this is the new year, right? We all see a new year, a new me. But let's face it, if you're out there and you're looking for a coach or a mentor or somebody to help with those pattern interrupts and to guide you and be a friend for you, or your biggest champion to get you to where you need to go, then reach out to a coach. And if you want to reach out to me, you're more than welcome to do so. I highly encourage it. We do a free consultation, absolutely. And if people are out there, money's tight right now. I totally understand. And just on this episode right here, I'm going to tell people, if we show up for that initial consultation and things go well, I'm going to present you with a few challenges. And if you show up as that ambitious person looking to step into that role of living the greatest life that you want to live, step into that role of being the greatest version of yourself that you've literally dreamed of, and attracting the community and the people and having those kinds of conversations that literally you are so immersed in that you don't even see anything. Like, there's so much more content that we could have dove into today and we didn't. One of those things is become obsessed. When you obsess about your own growth and your own learning, you don't have time to worry about other people. Well, you don't have the time to worry about what they think or, how they're going to make fun of you, because you're like, yo, laugh at me if you want. I have too much work to do on myself and I get to do it. It's an opportunity and I'm going to love and have fun with the process because it is to be enjoyed. So if you're a person that wants to be seen, heard, and understood and be a part of this, dive deeper into not only Victor's community, but mine as well, is, hey, join me on Instagram, join me on social media, Facebook, head over to my website. And if you are one of those hungry individuals, I'll present you with a few challenges. If you follow through with those challenges, I promise you, I will deliver at least 3 months, at the very least 3 months of free personal coaching, guaranteed.
Wow.
I'm looking for those people that want to show up in their life and play in the biggest way. And it's not easy. Not everybody's up for the challenge because it means challenging their identity. But if they're willing to do so, I'm willing to be their guide. I'm willing to be their champion. I'm willing to meet them where they are because they have, let's face it, everybody's got a lot of love. They got a lot of talent, a lot of potential. But knowledge, right? Knowledge is not power. Action on the knowledge is what gives us power. We have somebody in a group and a community around us that helps to facilitate that process. We are able to step into that Yoda-like version of ourselves, that greatest version of ourselves. If you're willing to do that, I'm willing to be your champion. Let's go.
Here we go. So, Austin, I just want to thank you again for this opportunity. And that, my friend, is the end of this episode.
You're in control of how you feel. You're in control. You are the determining factor of your feelings. No one else can control how you feel. Remember, you're in control how you feel. So control your feelings.